Zareth pressed her back against the cold metal wall of the abandoned research facility, her breathing heavy but controlled. Purple blood seeped from a gash on her left shoulder where human plasma fire had grazed her. The wound burned with an intensity that reminded her why her people called humans fire demons. She was Kethmori, one of the elite warrior caste of her species. Standing nearly 8 feet tall with muscle-bound limbs that could crush steel, she had been bred for war across a dozen star systems. Her skin, a deep emerald green marked with silver war tattoos, bore the scars of countless battles. The bio-armor fused to her body pulsed with energy, enhancing her already formidable strength. For 3 cycles, her people had been losing ground to the human expansion. The small, pink-skinned creatures had appeared seemingly from nowhere, spreading across the galaxy like a plague. What they lacked in size and natural weapons, they made up for with cunning and an inexplicable refusal to surrender. Even when facing certain death, humans fought with a ferocity that disturbed even hardened Kethmori warriors. Zareth had volunteered for this suicide mission because she could no longer bear the shame of retreat. Intelligence suggested that this facility contained human research data that could turn the tide of war. If she could retrieve it, perhaps her people could finally understand how to defeat these relentless invaders. The facility was supposed to be abandoned. Intelligence was wrong. She counted at least 12 human soldiers patrolling the corridors, armed with their devastating plasma rifles. Each weapon could punch through Kethmori armor with ease. She had already killed 4 of them, but not before they had wounded her and called for reinforcements. Heavy footsteps echoed down the metal corridor, multiple sets, moving with military precision. Zareth checked her energy reserves, enough for perhaps 2 more shots from her particle cannon. Against a full squad, it would not be enough. She had faced death before, but never with such certainty. Kethmori warriors died with honor, taking as many enemies as possible. She gripped her weapon tighter and prepared for her final stand. The footsteps stopped just around the corner from her position. She could hear them communicating in their strange musical language. Unlike the harsh, guttural sounds of her own tongue, human speech flowed like water. It was disturbing how something so alien could sound almost pleasant. Thermal readings show wounded hostile approximately 10 meters ahead. A voice said in accented Galactic standard, "Biosignature indicates significant blood loss." "Weapons hot," another voice commanded. "Remember, these things are dangerous even when dying." Zareth almost laughed at the irony. They called her a thing, while she thought the same of them. Perhaps all warriors were more alike than different, regardless of species. She pressed a claw to the activation plate of her weapon and rolled around the corner, bringing her particle cannon to bear on the human squad. 5 soldiers in gleaming white armor stood in formation, their weapons already trained on her position. For a split second, time seemed frozen. The humans were smaller than she had expected from the battlefield reports. Even with their bulky armor, the tallest barely reached her chest. Their weapons looked almost toy-like in their small hands, yet she knew their destructive power. Behind their transparent face shields, she could see their features. Soft, vulnerable, with small eyes that somehow managed to convey both determination and something else she could not identify. "Stand down!" the lead soldier shouted, though he kept his weapon aimed at her center mass. "Drop your weapon and surrender!" Zareth almost fired immediately. The idea of surrendering to humans was unthinkable. Her ancestors would rise from their warrior graves to curse her name. Yet something made her hesitate. The human had given her a chance to surrender rather than simply opening fire. In 3 cycles of war, she had never heard of humans taking Kethmori prisoners. "You would keep me alive?" she asked in halting Galactic standard, her voice a deep rumble that made the humans flinch. "That's the idea," the leader replied. Behind his faceplate, she could see brown eyes that held no hatred, only wariness and something that might have been concern. "You're wounded. You need medical attention." Medical attention? For an enemy? Zarath's mind struggled to process the concept. In Kethmori culture, wounded enemies were given the honor of a quick death. Showing mercy was considered insulting. It implied the enemy was too weak to deserve a warrior's respect. "I am Kethmori," she said, raising her weapon slightly. "I do not surrender." The humans tensed, fingers moving to triggers. She could see the calculation in their eyes, the preparation for violence. Yet still the leader did not fire. "I'm Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen," he said instead. "What's your name, warrior?" The question hit her like a physical blow. Her name? He wanted to know her name? Enemies did not have names. They were simply obstacles to be overcome or threats to be eliminated. Yet this small human was asking for her identity as if it mattered. "Zarath of the Third Talon," she heard herself say. "Zarath," Sergeant Chen repeated, somehow managing to pronounce it correctly despite his alien vocal cords. "You fought well today. My soldiers speak of you with respect." Respect? From humans? The words were so alien that she wondered if her translator was malfunctioning. "I killed 4 of your pack mates," she said, testing him. "You did," he acknowledged without anger. "In honorable combat. They knew the risks when they chose to serve." Honorable combat. No human had ever applied such terms to fighting against her people. They were supposed to be savages, barely more intelligent than the beasts of her homeworld. Yet this Sergeant Chen spoke of honor and respect, as if he understood warrior concepts. "Why do you not fire?" she demanded. "I am your enemy." "Because you're wounded and outnumbered," Chen replied simply. "Because you could have killed my medic when she was treating Private Rodriguez, but you chose not to. Because right now you're no threat to anyone except yourself." Zarath remembered the moment he referenced. She had indeed had a clear shot at the human treating her wounded comrade. The small female had been completely exposed, focused entirely on saving the injured soldier's life. It would have been an easy kill, yet something had stayed her hand. She had told herself it was tactical, better to save her energy for real threats. But now, looking into Sergeant Chen's eyes, she wondered if her motivations had been more complex. "I could activate my weapons overload," she said. "Kill us all." "You could," Chen agreed, "but you won't." "How can you know this?" "Because you're a warrior, not a terrorist. Because you understand the difference between necessary killing and pointless slaughter." The accuracy of his assessment shook her to her core. How could this alien understand her better than some of her own species? How could he see past the propaganda and fear to recognize the honor that drove her? Her weapon arm began to shake from fatigue and blood loss. The energy readings were dropping rapidly. Soon the weapon would be useless anyway. She could see the humans tracking her weakness, yet still they held their fire. "If I surrender," she said slowly, "what happens to me?" "Medical treatment first," Chen replied immediately. "Then questioning, probably. Eventually prisoner exchange, if possible." Prisoner exchange? The concept was foreign to her language. She had to ask for clarification. "We trade captured soldiers back to their own sides," Chen explained, "usually when the fighting ends or during negotiations." They kept prisoners alive, not as slaves or trophies, but as people to be returned? The idea was so revolutionary that Zarath felt her worldview shifting beneath her feet. "This is your way?" she asked. "It's supposed to be," Chen said. "Doesn't always work out that way, but we try." The particle cannon grew heavier in her hands. She was losing too much blood to maintain combat effectiveness much longer. Soon the choice would be made for her. Yet the humans continued to wait, weapons ready but not firing. "Your leaders will be angry if you do not kill me," she said. "Maybe," Chen shrugged. But they'll be angrier if I murder a wounded prisoner who is trying to surrender. Murder. Not eliminate enemy combatant or neutralize threat. Murder. As if her life had value beyond its strategic worth. I do not understand your species, Zareth admitted. Join the club, Chen replied, and she could hear a smile in his voice despite not understanding the reference. I don't understand mine half the time either. The human medic stepped forward slightly. Sarge, she's lost a lot of blood. If we're going to do this, we need to do it now. Zareth looked at the female soldier. Young, small even by human standards, with gentle eyes behind her visor. This was the one she could have killed earlier, the one who had risked her life to save a comrade. You are the healer, Zareth said to her. Combat medic, the woman replied. Doc Martinez. You would treat me? Your enemy? You're hurt, Doc Martinez said simply. That makes you a patient first, enemy second. Patient first, enemy second. The words reverberated through Zareth's mind. In all her cycles of life, no one had ever put her needs before her identity as a warrior. She existed to fight, to kill, to die with honor. But to these humans, she was apparently a person before she was a weapon. Slowly, fighting every instinct bred into her over generations, Zareth lowered her particle cannon. The humans tensed, but did not fire. She set the weapon on the metal floor and kicked it away from herself. She began, then stopped. She had no words for what she was doing. Her language contained no equivalent for surrender that was not synonymous with disgrace. I yield, she finally said, using the closest translation she could manage. Sergeant Chen lowered his weapon first, followed by his squad. Smart choice, he said. Doc, she's all yours. The medic approached cautiously, but without fear, her hands already reaching for medical supplies. This is going to sting, she warned as she began examining the wound. But we'll have you patched up in no time. As alien hands touched her injured shoulder with surprising gentleness, Zareth realized that everything she had been taught about humans was wrong. They were not mindless savages or cruel demons. They were something far more dangerous to her people's way of thinking. They were compassionate. The thought terrified her more than any weapon ever had. The human medical facility was unlike anything Zareth had ever seen. White walls curved seamlessly into floors without joints or gaps, and the air hummed with the quiet efficiency of advanced technology. But what struck her most was the cleanliness, not just the absence of dirt, but the absence of death's scent that permeated every Keth Mori installation. She lay on a bio-bed designed for multiple species, restraints loose enough to be comfortable but strong enough to hold her if necessary. Her shoulder had been completely healed by human medical technology that seemed almost magical in its effectiveness. The doctors had even offered to remove some of her older scars, though she had declined. A warrior's scars were history written in flesh. For 5 days, she had been their prisoner, and for 5 days her understanding of the universe had been systematically destroyed. Dr. Sarah Kim sat across from her, reviewing data on a tablet. She was older than the soldiers, with silver streaks in her black hair and lines around her eyes that Zareth was learning indicated wisdom rather than weakness in human culture. Your healing factor is remarkable, Dr. Kim said, making notes. We could learn a lot from your physiology. And you will dissect me to do so? Zareth asked. Dr. Kim looked up, startled. Dissect you? No. Of course not. We don't experiment on prisoners, especially not sentient ones. I meant we could collaborate, if you were willing to share information about Keth Mori biology in exchange for human medical knowledge. Collaborate, share, exchange. These concepts kept appearing in human speech, alien ideas that had no direct translation in her language. The closest Keth Mori equivalent implied weakness and dependence. Your warriors spoke of respect, Zarath said carefully. Your healers speak of cooperation. Yet you fight us across a dozen worlds. Dr. Kim set down her tablet and leaned back in her chair. War is complicated, Zarath. Most of us never wanted to fight the Kethmori. When first contact happened, we tried for months to establish diplomatic relations. Lies, Zarath said automatically, though without the conviction she once felt. Your kind attacked our mining colonies without warning. Did we? Dr. Kim asked gently. Or is that what your leaders told you? The question hung in the air like a plasma bolt waiting to strike. Zarath had been present at the first battle of Corex Prime, had seen human ships emerging from hyperspace to assault the peaceful mining operation. But had she seen the moments before? Had she witnessed what provoked the attack? Your memories of that battle, Dr. Kim continued. Do they begin with human ships appearing? Or do they start earlier? Zarath closed her eyes, forcing herself to remember despite the pain. She had been young then, barely into her warrior trials. The memory began with alarms blaring and her commanding officer shouting orders, but what had triggered those alarms? I was not privy to command communications, she admitted. No soldier ever is, on any side. Dr. Kim pulled up a holographic display. This is the communication log from our first contact attempt at Corex Prime. The display showed timestamps and transmission records. Human ships had indeed arrived in the system, but the first entries showed peaceful contact attempts, requests for dialogue, offers of trade, even mathematical proofs of peaceful intent. Hours of unanswered communications before the first shot was fired. Your mining fleet ignored our hails for 6 hours, Dr. Kim explained. Then they fired on our diplomatic ship without warning. We responded in self-defense. Zarath stared at the data, her mind reeling. This could be fabricated. It could be, Dr. Kim agreed. Just as your briefings about human aggression could have been fabricated. The question is, which version makes more sense when you consider what you've seen here? Before Zarath could answer, the medical bay doors opened and Sergeant Chen entered. He had visited her daily, sometimes to question her about Kethmori military capabilities, but more often simply to talk. It was another alien behavior she struggled to understand. How's our patient today? He asked Dr. Kim. Physically perfect, mentally processing some difficult truths. The doctor stood. I'll leave you two to talk. Chen settled into the chair Dr. Kim had vacated. He moved with the careful precision of a soldier, but without the constant readiness for violence that characterized Kethmori warriors. Another puzzle. You look troubled, he observed. Your doctor claims my people fired first at Corex Prime. They did, Chen said simply. I was there. You were there. Zarath sat up straighter. Ensign Chen then, fresh out of the academy. I was on the UES Harmony, the diplomatic vessel your people targeted. He touched a scar on his neck. Spent 3 days in a medical pod after the attack. If this is true, Zarath said slowly, then why did my commanders tell us differently? Same reason your warriors are taught that surrender is disgraceful while ours are trained to accept prisoner status, Chen replied. Different cultures value different things. Your leaders value honor and strength above truth. Ours supposedly value truth above comfort, though we don't always live up to that ideal. Supposedly, Chen smiled ruefully. Humans aren't perfect, Zarath. We lie to ourselves all the time. We tell ourselves we're fighting for freedom while we expand into territories that don't belong to us. We claim to be peaceful while building bigger weapons. But at least some of us try to acknowledge our contradictions. The honesty was staggering. No Kethmori leader would ever admit imperfection to a subordinate, much less an enemy. Yet this human spoke of his species' flaws as casually as discussing the weather. Your culture confuses me, Zarath admitted. Join the club. I've been human for 34 years and I still don't get it half the time. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes. Through the medical bay's transparent walls, Zarath could observe the daily life of the human station. Soldiers and civilians mingled freely, their interactions casual and often accompanied by laughter. Children ran through corridors while adults worked with quiet efficiency. Children. She had not expected to see children on a military installation. "The young ones," she said, nodding toward the corridor. "Why are they here?" "This is a colonial station, not just a military outpost," Chen explained. "Families live here, scientists, engineers, teachers. The military is just part of the community." "You bring your vulnerable ones into war zones?" "We bring our families to new homes," Chen corrected. "We're not here to conquer the galaxy, Zarath. We're here to find places to live. Humans reproduce faster than our resources can keep up with. We need room to grow." Another revelation that shifted her worldview. The mighty human war machine was motivated not by conquest, but by necessity. They fought not for glory or domination, but for survival. "My people could help with this," she said without thinking. "How?" "Kethmori worlds are old, fully developed. We have perfected resource management over millennia. We could share knowledge of sustainable development, agricultural techniques, population control methods." Chen leaned forward. "You'd really consider that? Cooperation instead of conflict?" "If it meant an end to the killing?" Zarath paused, surprised by her own words. A few days ago, she would have considered such thoughts treason. Now they seemed like common sense. "There are humans who think the same way," Chen said. "Diplomats, scientists, even some military leaders. But the war hawks on both sides keep shouting them down." "War hawks?" "People who prefer fighting to talking. They exist in every species, I suspect." The medical bay doors opened again, admitting a figure that made Zarath's blood chill. Admiral Rebecca Harrison strode in with the bearing of someone accustomed to absolute authority. She was shorter than Sergeant Chen, but somehow commanded more space, her presence filling the room like a barely contained storm. "Sergeant," she said curtly, "I need to speak with the prisoner." Chen stood and saluted. "Yes, ma'am." The Admiral waited until he left before turning her attention to Zarath. Her eyes were hard as vacuum glass, holding none of the warmth Zarath had grown accustomed to from other humans. "So you're the famous Zarath of the Third Talon," Admiral Harrison said. "You've killed quite a few of my people." "I am a soldier," Zarath replied. "As are they." "Indeed." The Admiral circled the bio-bed like a predator evaluating prey. "My intelligence officers are very interested in information you might possess about Kethmori fleet movements, weapon capabilities, command structures." "I will not betray my people. Even if your people started this war based on lies, even if they've been feeding you propaganda while sending young warriors to die for no good reason." The questions struck like physical blows. Admiral Harrison had clearly been briefed on Dr. Kim's revelations. "I do not know what to believe anymore," Zarath admitted. "Then let me help you decide." The Admiral activated a holographic projector showing star charts marked with battle sites. "This is the Kepler sector 3 months ago. 7 human colonies, mostly agricultural. Population, 2.3 million civilians. The display shifted to show orbital bombardment patterns. Zarath recognized the tactical formations. They were Kethmori attack vectors. "This is the same sector yesterday. Population 0. Your people didn't just attack military targets, Zarath. They glassed entire worlds." The images showed burned cities and dead agricultural domes. No survivors, no infrastructure left intact. It was total annihilation, a level of destruction that served no strategic purpose. "This," Zarath struggled to speak, "this is not our way. Kethmori do not make war on civilians." "Don't they?" Admiral Harrison's voice was cold as space. "Or is that just another lie your leaders told you? We have laws, ancient codes that govern warfare. Civilians are protected. Non-combatants are sacred. Maybe your laws have changed. Maybe your leaders decided that human civilians don't count as people worth protecting. Zarath stared at the images, her mind reeling. If this was true, if her people had really committed such atrocities, then everything she believed about Kethmori honor was meaningless. "Why show me this?" she whispered. "Because you're going home," Admiral Harrison said. "Prisoner exchange, just like Sergeant Chen promised. Your government wants you back, and we have some of their people to trade." Home? The concept felt foreign now. "Yes, and when you get there, you're going to remember everything you've learned here, about human medicine that heals instead of just patching wounds for the next battle, about human children living alongside soldiers because we're building homes, not just war machines, about human soldiers who risk their lives to take prisoners instead of simply killing enemies." The Admiral leaned closer. "And you're going to ask yourself why your leaders lied to you about all of it." Zarath looked up at this stern human female, recognizing a warrior's spirit despite the alien features. "You believe I will become a traitor to my own kind. I believe you'll become something more dangerous than a traitor," Admiral Harrison replied. "I believe you'll become someone who asks questions. And questions, Zarath, are the most powerful weapons in any arsenal." The Admiral straightened and headed for the door, then paused. "The exchange is in 2 days. Use the time wisely." As the doors closed behind her, Zarath was left alone with thoughts that felt like poison and medicine combined. She had come to this place as a warrior seeking glorious death. She would leave as something else entirely, a person who had seen beyond the lies that fed war's hungry mouth. The question now was what she would do with that knowledge when she faced her own people again. The Kethmori warship, Bloodied Talon, felt alien to Zarath, despite being the same class vessel she had served on for most of her adult life. The corridors seemed narrower, the air thicker with the scent of aggression, and barely contained violence. Warriors moved through the ship with predatory grace, their conversations focused entirely on death, dominance, and the glory of battle. She had been back among her own people for 6 hours, and already she felt like a stranger in her own skin. Supreme Commander Thekvor stood at the center of the bridge, a massive figure even by Kethmori standards. His bio-armor was decorated with the skulls of fallen enemies, and his scarred face bore the ritual markings of a warrior who had never known defeat. He had personally commanded the mission to retrieve her from human captivity. "Warrior Zarath," his voice rumbled like distant thunder, "you have returned from the den of demons. The healer priests will purify you of their contamination, and then you will provide intelligence for our next assault." Contamination. The word cut deeper than any blade. In Kethmori belief, extended contact with enemies could pollute a warrior's spirit, making them weak and indecisive. The purification ritual would involve pain, isolation, and psychological reconditioning to restore her proper mindset. "Yes, Supreme Commander," she replied, though the words felt like ash in her mouth. "Good." Thekvor turned back to the tactical displays. "The humans grow desperate. They have requested a ceasefire to negotiate terms. Soon they will kneel before the might of the Kethmori Empire." A ceasefire? For negotiations? Zarath felt her heart skip in synchronization. If true, this could be the chance for peace that Sergeant Chen had spoken of. But looking at the bloodlust in her commander's eyes, she realized that any human overtures for peace would likely be seen as weakness to exploit. "Commander," she said carefully, "what terms do the humans offer?" Thekvor laughed, a sound like metal grinding against stone. "They offer to retreat from disputed territories in exchange for an end to hostilities. They promise to limit their expansion and share certain technologies." "And our response?" We will feign consideration while we mass our fleets for the final assault. When they lower their guard for negotiations, we will strike at their core worlds. The war will end with their complete annihilation." The words hit Zarath like a plasma bolt to the chest. Everything the humans had told her about Kethmori deception was true. Her people were planning to use peace talks as a weapon to massacre negotiators and civilians alike. "Commander," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady, "is this honorable?" The bridge fell silent. Every warrior turned to stare at her with expressions ranging from shock to outrage. Questioning a superior's honor was grounds for immediate execution in military law. Thekvor slowly turned to face her, his eyes burning with fury. "What did you say, warrior?" Zarath felt the weight of a dozen particle weapons targeting her, but Admiral Harrison's words echoed in her mind. Questions are the most powerful weapons in any arsenal. "I ask if deceiving enemies during peace negotiations upholds the warrior codes passed down from our ancestors," she said. "The humans are not worthy of honor," Thekvor snarled. "They are vermin to be exterminated, not warriors to be respected. The codes do not apply to lesser species." "But they showed me honor," Zarath replied. "They could have killed me when I was wounded and defenseless. Instead, they healed my wounds and treated me with respect. They filled your mind with lies and weakness." Thekvor backhanded her across the face with enough force to send her staggering. "This is why warriors require purification after contact with demons." Zarath tasted blood from her split lip, but she remained standing. "They showed me evidence, Commander. Records of first contact at Corex Prime. The humans attempted peaceful communication for hours before our forces opened fire. Fabricated data designed to corrupt your loyalty. Then show me our own records of that battle," Zarath challenged. "Let me see the proof that humans fired first." The silence stretched like a taut wire. Thekvor's hand moved to his sidearm, and Zarath prepared herself for death. But instead of drawing his weapon, the Supreme Commander activated a holographic communicator. "High Priest Mordagoth," he growled, "I require immediate spiritual intervention. My warrior is severely contaminated by human mind poison." The hologram that appeared was even more intimidating than Thekvor. High Priest Mordagoth was ancient by Kethmori standards, his body more cybernetic enhancement than flesh. His voice carried the authority of generations of warrior tradition. "Warrior Zarath," the High Priest intoned, "you question the wisdom of your superiors. This is the first sign of spiritual corruption." "I question lies presented as truth," Zarath replied. "The humans kept detailed records of every battle, every communication attempt, every offer of peace we rejected. They have evidence we fired first at Corex Prime." "And you believe demon lies over the word of your own kind?" "I believe what I witnessed with my own eyes. Human soldiers who risk their lives to take prisoners instead of killing. Human doctors who heal enemy wounded. Human families living alongside warriors because they build homes, not just war machines." High Priest Mordagoth's cybernetic eyes glowed brighter. "The contamination runs deeper than expected. Prepare her for complete memory restructuring." Memory restructuring. The process would erase everything she had learned during her captivity, leaving her mind a blank slate to be refilled with approved thoughts and beliefs. She would return to being the perfect warrior she had once been, uncomplicated by questions or doubts. "Wait," she said quickly. "If I am truly corrupted, if everything I say is lies and contamination, then surely the truth will easily disprove my claims. Show me our records of Corex Prime. Show me evidence that humans are the monsters you claim them to be." Thekvor and Mordagoth exchanged glances. The fact that they hesitated told Zarath everything she needed to know. "The details of military operations are classified," Thekvor finally said. "From a warrior of the Third Talon? From someone who has fought in dozens of battles?" Zarath pressed. Or are they classified because they contradict our official version of events? Enough! Mordagoth's voice echoed through the bridge. Your corruption threatens the morale of every warrior present. You will submit to memory restructuring immediately, or you will be executed as a traitor. Zarath looked around the bridge at warriors she had fought beside, bled beside, who had once called her sister in arms. Now they watched her with suspicion and disgust, ready to kill her for asking uncomfortable questions. If I submit to your procedure, she said, will you at least delay the attack on the human peace negotiators, give diplomacy a chance? Diplomacy is for the weak, Thekvor spat. We are Keth Mori. We take what we want by strength of arms. Then we are no better than the raiders and pirates we claim to despise. The words were treason of the highest order. Every warrior on the bridge drew their weapons, particle cannons charging with deadly energy. But Zarath felt no fear, only a strange sense of freedom. I was taught that Kethmori warriors fight with honor, she continued, that we protect the innocent and respect worthy enemies, that our strength serves justice, not mere conquest. But if those teachings are lies, if we are nothing more than murderers hiding behind codes of honor, then I am not Kethmori. You renounce your heritage? Mordagoth asked, his voice deadly quiet. I renounce lies. I renounce the slaughter of innocents. I renounce a war built on deception and maintained by fear of the truth. Zarath straightened to her full height, every inch the proud warrior despite being surrounded by enemies. My name is Zarath of the Third Talon, and I declare this war to be without honor. Thekvor raised his weapon. Then you die without honor. No, said a new voice from the bridge entrance. She dies as a warrior should, with truth on her lips and courage in her hearts. Everyone turned to see Commander Veltar, leader of the Second Talon and Zarath's former mentor. Behind him stood a dozen warriors, their weapons drawn but not yet aimed. Veltar? Thekvor snarled. What is the meaning of this? I have been listening to this conversation through the communication channels, Veltar replied calmly. Warrior Zarath asks questions we should have asked long ago. Questions about honor, about truth, about what we have become. She is contaminated by human lies. Then prove it, Veltar challenged. Show us the unedited records of Corex Prime. Show us evidence that human civilians deserve to die. Show us proof that we are the noble warriors we claim to be, and not the butchers our enemies see. Thekvor's hand shook with rage. This is mutiny! This is awakening, another voice said. Commander Kesh-Ara of the Fourth Talon entered the bridge with her own contingent of warriors. I, too, have wondered why our victories feel hollow, why our enemies fight so desperately, why captured humans speak of homes and families instead of conquest and glory. One by one, other commanders entered the bridge. Not all of them, perhaps only a third of the ship's warrior complement, but enough to create a standoff. These were veterans who had fought the humans for 3 cycles and begun to notice inconsistencies in their briefings. The human peace delegation arrives at the neutral zone in 6 hours, Veltar announced. I propose we answer their call for negotiations with honesty instead of deception. I will not permit this betrayal, Thekvor roared. Then we are at an impasse, Veltar replied sadly. Warrior against warrior, honor against tradition. Zarath stepped forward, placing herself between the 2 factions. There is another way. Send me to the human delegation as a representative. Let me verify their claims of peaceful intent. If I am wrong, if they are the demons our leaders claim, then you can proceed with your attack. But if I am right, if you are right, Thekvor said coldly, then everything we have believed is a lie. Yes, Zarath agreed. Everything. The bridge remained silent for long moments, weapons trained on weapons, warriors facing warriors in a confrontation that would determine the fate of 2 species. Finally, High Priest Mordagoth spoke. The contamination spreads, he observed clinically. But perhaps it is time to test its true nature. Very well. Warrior Zarath will contact the human delegation. If their response proves their demonic nature, all doubts will be resolved. If not, Veltar prompted. If not, then we must consider the possibility that we have become the demons in this war. As alarms began to sound throughout the ship, some calling warriors to battle stations, others to witness an unprecedented experiment in truth-seeking, Zarath realized that her capture by humans had saved more than just her life. It had planted seeds of doubt that were now blossoming into something that might, against all odds, become peace. The war was far from over, but for the first time in 3 cycles, it was no longer inevitable. Questions, as Admiral Harrison had predicted, were indeed the most powerful weapons in any arsenal, and Zarath had just fired the shot that might end a conflict built on lies and sustained by the fear of asking what was really true. In the distance, human ships waited at the edge of neutral space, carrying diplomats who hoped against hope that their enemies might be ready to listen. Soon they would discover whether the galaxy's future held continued darkness or the first dawn of understanding between 2 species that had more in common than either had ever dared to believe.